Folks, I'm Rob Trotman, and welcome to Sports on Tap. It's our Week 4 high school football game recaps, and we're going to cover the Greater Cleveland Conference, the Southwestern Conference, the Great Lakes Conference, and the Suburban League all coming up. We also have our G&G Fitness Coach of the Week. The final results are in. We'll get to that. And also our RRT Productions Player of the Week. Guys, welcome back as Week 4 is in the books, and it was a pretty exciting week. Some interesting things have happened around in the Southwestern Conference, at least there, but that I had a chance to cover in Amherst. What about you guys? What did you see in your respective conferences? Let's start with Sean.
Of course, you do it when I have ice.
Oh, you haven't. Oh, all right. Let's go to Josh. Sean Duffy's playing with ice cubes.
I literally just drank some water. Sorry.
You never know what can happen.
Well, we'll get right into it. Greater Cleveland Conference, with the exception of one game, really, there was not a lot of competition amongst the teams. This week, we welcome Solon back into 2020 gameplay. We'll actually start with them. They weren't going to play at first, and then they decided to come back. So this game was their first game of the season. They played St. Vincent St. Mary out of Akron, and it was all St. Vincent St. Mary in this one as they go on to beat Solon 28-7. In this one, Solon was led by Khalil Eichelberger. He had 14 rushing attempts for 91 yards. Quarterback Pat McQuaid was 12 for 22, 89 yards. He did toss a touchdown, but also threw an interception. Basically, this was just a battle of a team that's played this is the fourth game as St. Vincent St. Mary. This was their fourth game in Solon. Probably did not have a lot of practice time coming into this game, and you could tell on the offensive end. Total yards in this game, St. Vincent St. Mary had 387 total yards as a team. Solon only had 106. So Solon's got some building to do. They got a game coming up this week. Their second game, it's a home game. We'll talk about that at the very end of the recap. We'll go over the Week 5 schedule in the GCC. Conference play goes as follows. We're going to start off at Medina with a crushing win against Elyria. They won this game 61-6. It was actually a 27-0 lead for the Medina Bees after the first quarter. As always with Medina, the running game, not so much. It was all passing. So Drew Alar in this one, he was 19 of 33, 305 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was actually pulled in the third quarter. Ryan Gillespie came in. He was 6 of 15 for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns. For Elyria, Dalen Charlo was 11 of 22, 95 yards. He did throw 2 interceptions. And Jaheim Atkinson, who was my Week 1 nominee for Player of the Week, he had 14 rushing attempts, 51 yards, and the only Elyria touchdown. For Elyria, this is actually their 21st straight loss in a row in conference for Elyria. So they got off to a good start against Elyria Catholic, but getting into that conference play, it's been tough for them. Medina improves to 2-2. That's 2 victories that they've had last week against Strongsville, this week against Elyria, and they will move on later on this week in more conference play. Elyria drops to 1-3 on the year. The closest game of the week was the Strongsville Mustangs against the Euclid. And this one, Strongsville came away with a shocking 35-26 victory over Euclid. And now what really hurt Euclid in this game was they were not able to get much going on the offensive end, and they were forced to punt a lot, and their punts ended up being very short. So it provided Strongsville with a very, very short field position, and that's where Jack Crotty took over for the Mustangs. He had 30 carries in this game, totaling 188 yards and 2 touchdowns in this one. Quarterback Maddox Beard had 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 passing. He totaled 63 yards rushing, and the Mustangs also scored on a block punt. Euclid was up early in this game. Strongsville did come back, and they pretty much ruled the second half of the game and is able to score and take the lead. So they ended up winning 35-26. Strongsville improves to 2-1. Euclid drops to 2-2 on the season. Now, my game of the week, the game that I was at, Cardinals. Mentor won 38-0. Really on the back of a powerful defense and a powerful running game. They were led by Riley Coughlin, 9 rushing attempts, 91 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And they were pretty much all the rushing attempts were up the middle. The offensive line, we talk about football, battle of the trenches, and Mentor won on both ends, both on the offensive line and defensive line. They were just too strong and too big for the Blue Devils in this one. Quarterback Ian Kipp had 184 total yards and 3 touchdowns, 2 passing, 1 rushing. And in this game, Ethan Fritz and the offense could not get anything going for the Blue Devils. They only totaled 78 yards of offense in this game after last week's where they had a double two-headed attack on the running game, and they were able to really pound the ball against Delirier. They were not able to do it in this game against Mentor. Mentor improves to 3-1 on the season. Brunswick drops to 2-2. So the schedule, big schedule coming up this week in the GCC. As we mentioned, Kirtland. This is a big, interesting matchup. Kirtland will travel to Solon. We'll see how the Comets do against Kirtland, a powerhouse in their division. So we'll see how they'll do. Medina will travel to Euclid. Let's see if they can continue their hot offensive ways. Elyria will travel to Mentor. And the rivalry amongst rivalries for 3 out of the 4 of us in this group, Brunswick will travel to Strongsville. So this is a prove-it game for Brunswick and also a prove-it game to Strongsville. Strongsville's looking to see how they are after, coming through with a loss against Medina, but a big win against Euclid. Brunswick was playing strong. They had some good showings against Euclid and Mentor. I'm sorry, not Mentor. Euclid. They beat Medina in this one. So we'll see how this one goes. That's the big game of the week in the GCC. My coach of the week, not my G&G Fitness Coach of the Week nominee, was Strongsville coach Lou Serino. And my Player of the Week nominee, my RT Productions Player of the Week nominee, will go to Strongsville running back Jack Crotty. Just a great performance, really putting his team on his back to beat a good team in Euclid. So congratulations to not only Lou Serino for being my nominee, but Jack Crotty for also being my nominee as well. And that quickly, I think that's the quickest I've ever done the GCC. But that wraps up the GCC. Really not in terms of, just the one game, Strongsville Euclid. Not much competition going on in this one. But a good, solid performance by Strongsville to really put them above the 500 mark. And maybe this is what we've been talking about all year is the fact that as the season progresses, as we move into October, you're supposed to be playing your best football. And maybe Strongsville's on that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see Strongsville, and you're right. You're dead on with that comparison. It's a prove-it game for both Brunswick and Strongsville coming up this week, and it's going to be interesting to see which one of those teams, having to play Mentor and then turn around and seeing where Strongsville is, I think is going to give Brunswick a really good test of what kind of team they are, especially with, we still have a quarterback that's, kind of finding his way a little bit, coming in from an injury. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they react to having won the loss against Mentor, which unfortunately, I know it's going to sting a little bit, but Mentor's a tough team. It's a tough out for anybody. Even on your best day, you got to you got to have a lot of luck, and it just didn't happen for Brunswick. Elyria, that's a tough thing to happen. 21 straight conference losses. That's something that needs to be corrected pretty quickly if you're Elyria, and hopefully they can find that. But again, playing in the GCC does not lend itself to quote unquote easy wins. You got to come every week. So it'll be interesting to see, but great wrap up there, Josh. It was very quick and to the point, and very much like your rain, short and not so sweet.
So to your point, Sean, Elyria, they are going to do something about their conference woes. They're just going to go to new conference.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Unfortunately, Elyria has had some success in this conference in the past. They're one of the few teams that I wouldn't expect to have beaten Mentor. To have beaten Mentor, that happened years ago. I think the talent gap right now just isn't where Elyria needs it to be as competitive in the GCC as we were used to seeing them be competitive against. The Brunswick Strongsville game needs no introduction. It needs no more words. So I'll just leave it at that. Go blue.
Except for these words. It starts at 7 on Friday.
Even though I know I'm not actively involved as much as I have been, I clearly want us to beat Strongsville, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. So, and then one of the things that you mentioned, Solon's going to take on Kirtland, and that's a fantastic matchup because this is one of those few games that we talked about at the beginning of the season where you're going to see some games being played that you would never see played in a normal schedule. Kirtland has already played a Division I opponent. They took on Shaker Heights earlier in the year, and they ended up pulling away from Shaker Heights near the end of that game. And Kirtland's, Tiger Laverty's I believe is their coach, and he's gone on. He has said that people want to see what we do against bigger schools. They just think we beat up on the smaller schools. No, they went to Shaker Heights and beat them, and I'm really interested in seeing how Kirtland and Solon are going to pan out. Kirtland having played a couple of games in advance of Solon's contest here. But I applaud Solon I applaud both teams for making this game happen because you're going to see one of the best, probably the best school in Division V take on one of the perennial powerhouses in Division I in a matchup you'll never really ever see outside of in a normal schedule. So looking real forward to that game.
Now, you bring up a good point, Ed. I mean, could that be something that you may see, in the future? So for a team like, a Kirtland, who is a powerhouse, is that something we could see?
That's a good question because Kirtland's going to win enough games they'll be able to. I think they'll be fine suffering a loss to a Division I school because they'll make up their points elsewhere. If they beat a Division I school, no less Solon, their points are going to go through the roof. They'll be the number 1 seed in their region, pretty much hands down. A team like Solon, the risk is bigger there because you don't want to give away games as a Division I, especially in the region that Solon is in. If you think you could beat them, you're not going to get very many. You're not going to get a whole lot of points from a Division V, no matter where it is. Though I think that's the issue here. You're not talking about level of competition because the level of competition I think is going to be comparable. But you may not see that happen too often, where a Division I school plays a Division V school, unless you have a chance to beat that Division V school. Otherwise, you're almost, I don't want to say throwing that game away because you're playing great competition. But with how the Harbin points run, it's very, very black and white. And it may not be as beneficial to Solon to play that game, potentially lose that game. And you don't know what the upside is from the points perspective because Kirtland's going to be beating teams that are also Division IV, Division V. And so they're getting those lower points from that. So I would love to see more of those games. The big school going against the small school. That's the kind of stuff you see in TV shows and movies and read about in books. But with the way the playoffs are set up here in Ohio, that doesn't lend itself to too many of those matchups.
But we may see them in October.
Yes,
we'll see.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. I think they did a great job this year. I mean, figuring this out. I mean, it's been on the fly, but I like that. Teams have to figure out if they want to make go. Everybody can make the playoffs. It just depends if they want to do that or not. So we'll see what happens. But nice job, Josh, with the GCC. Well done, and you got to see Mentor up close and personal there in Brunswick, our old stomping grounds, and very impressive win for them. And they're just a tough team. They play well and very fundamentally sound. So now we'll go to the Southwestern Conference. And I had the chance of going to Amherst, and we'll end with that game. But right now, let's go to Midview as they hosted Berea Mid-Park. Both teams didn't have a win. And in this game, it really went back and forth. As we'll skip to halftime when it was 21-17, Berea Mid-Park. They led in this game, but Midview, they struck first in the second half with a 50-yard Ethan Surdock, the quarterback there, to Bratkovich. He had a big pass there to give the Middies a 24-21 lead in the third quarter. Then Berea Mid-Park, they would answer and get a big score from Aquan Bell to extend their lead 28-24. Midview, they did have a great drive going, but it was junior defensive back Cameron Kupak he intercepted Surdock, and that actually ended the game as the Titans escaped with a 28-24 win in this one. Junior cornerback Luke Devins for Berea Mid-Park, he had his best game of the season. He completed 20 of 30 passes for 301 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was Aquan Bell. He led the ground attack for Berea Mid-Park. He had over 100 yards for the first time this season, 26 carries, 111 yards. And it was Johnson for Berea Mid-Park. Devin Johnson with 6 catches for 85 yards. Jack Arnold had 6 catches for 75 and a touchdown for the Titans receiving corps. So a big win there as they improved to 1-3 on the season, 1-3, or actually 1-2 in conference, as Midview falls to 0-4. Now moving on to North Ridgeville as they hosted Olmsted Falls, and this was a close game early on as North Ridgeville kicked a 30-yard field goal and was up 3-0, but quickly Olmsted Falls answered. And it kind of went back and forth as for North Ridgeville, it's Jacob Gaddis finding wide receiver Carter Grawn an 83-yard pass for the Rangers. They actually led 10-7, but the Bulldogs, after one quarter, led 14-10 in this game. And just when you thought this could be a tough, close game, in the second quarter, Olmsted Falls scored 27 points and led at halftime 41-10.
Oof.
And I don't even know what happened there. The Rangers all of a sudden down big, and eventually the Rangers would score once more with an 85-yard touchdown run by Connor Costin. But the Bulldogs, they stay atop the SWC with a 47-16 win. It was Andrew Parkowski. He had 3 touchdowns on the night. But what a win for Olmsted Falls as they battled early on and then all of a sudden just pulled away in that second quarter. Now, Avon, they hosted Olmsted Falls. And actually, in that game, North Ridgeville 0-4 now. Olmsted Falls improves to 3-1. So now Avon, they're undefeated, hosting North Olmsted. And Avon, their offense, they came off firing right away. And before half, it was Devin Hunter. He had 3 touchdowns, and quarterback Nico Pappas, he had 2 scores before halftime. Avon was up 21-0 before the Eagles actually got on the board with Anthony Gershio, the quarterback for North Olmsted, connecting with wide receiver Jared Kelly. It was 21-7 in this game, and Avon struck again with Devin Hunter. At halftime, it was 35-7 Avon in this game as they rolled in this SWC conference game, 42-14. And some stats for Avon: they had 385 rushing yards, including 122 by quarterback Nico Pappas. 118 yards from running back Desmond Kelly, and 96 yards from Devin Hunter. For North Olmsted, Anthony Gershio, he had 154 yards passing and 2 touchdowns as Avon improves to 4-0 with the win, and North Olmsted falls to 1-2 on the season. Now moving to Westlake versus Cuyahoga Falls, and Sean, I figured you'd have this one, but I do have a little bit on this game. As the Demons in this game, they actually jumped out to a 14-0 lead with a 76-yard bomb from Mackie Keenan to Cooper Rummel. And Connor Gregory also had a 7-yard run. So the Black Tigers, they got back into it, and they scored once in the quarter, but they did miss an extra point. And then in the second quarter, it was Cuyahoga Falls with the score of touchdown, and they led 14, or actually, the extra point to make the halftime lead, only 14-13, and Westlake did lead in this game. But Westlake in this game got, after another Connor Gregory touchdown, it was actually set up by Keenan Bednar pass on the play, and the Demon defense, they did a great job with an interception by Bednar, and Gregory added another score from 6 yards out, and they were up 28-13 in this game. Christian Rogers, though, he took a bad snap on an extra point in for a 2-point conversion, which would loom large after the Tigers scored with 36.2 left in the game, but after a motion penalty on the conversion, it took them back to the 8-yard line, and the Demon defense, they got to stop and recovered the onside kick, and they got the victory in this game as they win and escape versus Cuyahoga Falls. It was 28-26. The Demons, they now improved to 2-2 as Cuyahoga Falls falls to 0-3.
Yeah, Cuyahoga Falls had a tough road to hoe here because they had to travel to Westlake, and they, you know what, they hung in there against a pretty game Westlake squad right now. I know we talked to Coach LaRocca earlier this year, and he was a little bit, like everybody, a little bit unsure of his team, but they seem to be galvanizing themselves and getting wins, and or at least not, they're not getting blown off the field as they were last year. I mean, they have what, 3 times the amount of wins they had last year. So I mean, that's a great thing to build on, and like you said, it's a very young team. Cuyahoga Falls on the flip side, it's more of the same for them. They're switching, divisions this year, but unfortunately they're finding the same result. Obviously an out of conference game against Westlake, but last week against Copley, and next week it doesn't get any easier for them. They got to play an Aurora team that's coming off a big win against a big team that they unexpectedly had to take on. I'll get into that when I get into the Suburban League. But yeah, the cross. I think this is our first cross conference matchup on the show. Am I right? I think it's all been mostly conference play.
Yeah, and I don't know if Westlake would have played Cuyahoga Falls if they were going to stay in the SWC and play those games, but they decided to kind of go on an independent schedule, and they're playing all kinds of different teams this year.
It's called synergy. That's what it is. Synergy.
Wow. All right. Well, my last.
Moving on.
2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah, pretty much. That's 2020 math, Ed. Don't you be doing 2020 math.
All right. Let's go to my last game, and this is just this was a really physical good game. It was Amherst as they hosted Avon Lake, and Avon Lake has really dominated this series. I was overhearing somebody here, and I think they said that Avon Lake has won 20 in a row against the Comets. And this was a close one, though, as Amherst was coming in undefeated, and Avon Lake, they still did have that loss against Avon starting off. And right away, it was Gage Dusler, as Avon Lake was trying to establish the run early on. The Shoremen on their first drive went 80 yards and capped it off with a 23-yard touchdown run by Shoreman running back Gage Dusler. And there was a theme with him in this game, as he was fed the ball a lot in this one, as Avon Lake led 7-0 in the first quarter. It was 8:45 left in that first quarter, and really it was a physical game right from the first quarter. But it was 7-0 in that first quarter, and that was it. Then in the second quarter, a physical defense, it was starting to pick up a little bit as Amherst, their defense sacked Shoreman quarterback Michael Corbo 2 times on their first drive in the second quarter, forcing a punt. Then the Comets, they established a nice drive with runs by Torrey Weatherspoon and passes from quarterback Tyler Brazina to Ty Weatherspoon. He's also the brother of Torrey there. And they were really a 1-2 combo on the drive that went all the way down deep into Avon Lake territory. But there were 2 holding penalties that brought them back, and their drive stalled. And then in that following series, the Shoremen, they went down the field and struck in the second quarter with another Gage Dusler 6-yard touchdown run with 1:31 left in the second quarter. And at halftime, it was the Shoremen leading 14-0 in that game. In the third quarter, though, Amherst, they would come out with a 12-play drive all the way down to the Avon Lake 17-yard line and would fumble the football as Jonathan West looked to break free and try to get the extra yardage, and the Shoreman defense stripped the ball away and recovered at the 3-yard line. And then Avon Lake had the ball going into the fourth quarter. They had it in the third quarter, and they continued that on a nice drive into the fourth, and they would continue to run the ball with Dusler there, and they did a nice balance in this drive, going with Michael Corbo as well. In the Shoreman's passing game, they hit on a 29-yard pass here, Michael Corbo to wide receiver Mitchell Fetters, but it was called back on a holding call, so they thought it would be a 21-0 lead, but that would bring it back. The Shoremen, though, they would continue to drive, and eventually they gave it to Dusler once again in a 26-yard touchdown run, and they led 21-0. Eventually, Amherst would score on a 65-yard touchdown catch and run by Amherst running back Alden Steele from quarterback Tyler Brazina, and he ran away from the Shoreman defense. It was 21-7 with 3:21 left. They tried for an onside kick. They couldn't get it, and that's how the game would end. It was 21-7. The Shoremen get a road win at Amherst. They improved to 3-1, and Amherst now, who was unbeaten at 3-0, falls to 3-1. And in Week 5, Avon Lake, they'll again take to the road, taking on North Olmsted as Amherst. They'll travel and get tested against Olmsted Falls. Some stats: Avon Lake running back Gage Dusler had 25 carries for 204 yards and 3 touchdowns. And for the Amherst Comets, it was Tyler Brazina, the quarterback, 10 of 14, 119 yards and a touchdown there. And for the SWC, the G&G Fitness Coach of the Week, it was Matt Kostelnik of Avon Lake. He won 3 in a row after falling in a 2-overtime game to Avon. So thought, he's really gotten his team back on track. And then the RRT Productions Player of the Week is Avon Lake running back Gage Dusler, who ran 25 times for 204 yards and 3 touchdowns. In the Week 5 schedule, Berea Mid-Park at 1-3 travels to Avon 4-0, Amherst 3-1 versus Olmsted Falls. Both teams 3-1 here in a big SWC matchup. In the battle of the unbeatens here, Midview 0-4 takes on North Ridgeville 0-4. Avon Lake 3-1. They'll travel to North Olmsted, who's 1-2, and that rounds out the Southwestern Conference. As nothing surprising. Although the Avon Lake Amherst game was a tough physical game, but again, Amherst just couldn't pull it off in the end. They couldn't really get any offense going against a very good Avon Lake defense.
Amherst has built themselves up in the last couple of years to be a very good team, starting to get into the upper echelon of the SWC. But they need to get over the hump of getting victories over the Avons, the Avon Lakes, and the Olmsted Fallses. They need to get at least one of those games here, in order to consider themselves as part of that top third of that conference.
Yeah.
But I think they've settled in. They've ascended quite nicely into the upper mid tier, if you will. Then Avon and Avon Lake. Since Avon has joined this conference, they've been the class of the conference since they've joined, and they've provided quite the foil for the rest of the conference foes, and going back and forth with Avon Lake, a game they always played anyways because they're right next to each other before they were in conference play. But that's just a fantastic, those two teams. It reminds me a lot of when we were in school. It was always Brunswick, Strongsville, and the Pioneer Conference that was competing for the conference championship year in and year out. That's what Avon and Avon Lake are doing right now in the SWC.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it seems like it's Avon, Avon Lake, and then you have Olmsted Falls and Amherst, in the top there. But it seems like it's always Avon and Avon Lake that are at the top, and somebody's going to have to knock them out eventually. But they just have such good, well-balanced programs that it's tough for any of the other teams right now to knock them off. But Olmsted Falls was close, and also Avon Lake was close, in a game against Avon. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
I'll say this. Olmsted Falls is not a team I would want to see in the playoffs. It doesn't matter if I'm Avon or Avon Lake. It doesn't matter if I've beaten them in the regular season or not. That is not a team I want to play a second time, let alone in a winner-take-all game at all.
Yeah. Yep, I would agree, Ed. But let's go now to the Great Lakes Conference. Ed, you have the Great Lakes Conference. What happened there?
All right, we'll start week 4 with defending co-champion, the Holy Name Green Wave, 1-1 coming into this game, taking on the Rocky River Pirates. They were 1-0. After taking a 3-0 lead, Green Wave quarterback Javon Williams scored on a 25-yard run. He then followed that up with a 20-yard touchdown pass to Eric Jones Jr. for a 17-0 lead. Green Wave running back Christian Sanchez scored on runs of 7 and 6 yards out for a 31-0 lead. The Green Wave cruised to a 34-0 shutout of the Rocky River Pirates. Green Wave running back Christian Sanchez, he led the way, rushing 22 times for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Green Wave, they almost tripled the Pirates in total yardage, 353 yards to 122. Rocky River quarterback Braden Speece had a little bit of a rough one. He had 95 yards passing on 9 of 17, 9 completions out of 17 attempts. With the win, Holy Name improves to 2-1 overall. They will travel to Parma next week. Rocky River is 1-1. They will travel to Parma, Normandy in week 5. The Bay Rockets, 0-1 coming into this game. They traveled to Byers Field to take on the Valley Forge Patriots, 1-0 coming into this game. After trading touchdowns, Patriots running back Kentrell Marks busted loose and scored from 72 yards out to give Valley Forge a 14-7 game lead. This was a very back-and-forth contest. Marks struck again from 15 yards out, giving Valley, and then he struck again from 15 yards out. Valley Forge comes away with a 34-28 victory over Bay. Again, a very, very good contest. Kentrell Marks led the Patriots with 24 carries for 278 yards and 5 touchdowns. Bay's Tony Batari and Nick Batari, they accounted for most of the TDs for the Rockets. But Valley Forge improved to 2-0. They will travel to York Township to take on Buckeye. Bay drops to 0-2. They will host Fairview. Parma took on Fairview, both 0-1 teams. Unfortunately, not a whole lot on this game, but the Warriors of Fairview, they get their first victory of the year, beating the Redmen 26-10. So congratulations to Fairview for their first victory of the year. Fairview improves to 1-1. They will travel to Bay next week. Parma is 0-2. They will host Holy Name. Finally, the last game on my slate, only because the Buckeye and Elyria Catholic was one of the SOT podcast games of the week. Lakewood was 0-3. They hosted Normandy. Not a whole lot in this game either, but the Rangers, they get their first victory of the season in the not only in the season, but also in Great Lakes Conference play. So congratulations to Coach Thomas Tomey there. There was one standout performance. Let me pull him up right quick. Hassan Koren ran. He's a junior running back. He ran wild. He had 20 carries for 195 yards. He also scored 5 touchdowns. So 2 running backs in the Great Lakes Conference each tallied 5 touchdowns in their respective games. So great game by Hakeem Koren of Lakewood. And with the win, Lakewood is 1-3. They will look for their second win of the season against Elyria Catholic. Normandy is 0-2. They will host Rocky River. All right, the G&G Fitness Coach of the Week was Thomas Tomey of Lakewood for their first victory in Great Lakes Conference play. The RRT Productions Great Lakes Conference Player of the Week, it's Kentrell Marks, running back of Valley Forge. The numbers speak for themselves. 24 carries for 278 yards and 5 touchdowns. So congratulations to Kentrell Marks and Thomas Tomey for being your respective player and coach of the week. Not, quite honestly, the best game that was on the docket from at least some of the games that I reviewed clearly was Bay versus Valley Forge. This was a back and forth contest. Coach Marcello DeAngelis for Valley Forge has a really, really good group of players that are carrying out that wing T offense. They run the ball, and they run the ball a lot, and they run it very, very well. So they're very, very tough to stop. Kentrell Marks is a beast. He's a returning starter from last year, and he had some breakout moments last year. He has picked up right where he left off, and is absolutely leading the Patriots in the first 2 games here. Holy Name and Rocky River. Holy Name is the defending co-champion for a reason, and they certainly showed that in their victory over Rocky River. And then we're starting to see some of the other teams, Parma, Fairview, Lakewood, and Normandy. Those 4 teams are battling to establish themselves a little bit in the conference. And unfortunately for Normandy, they are similarly on a course of same course as Elyria has as far as futility in their conference play. The conference will be better when Normandy gets better. Back in the late 2000s, they had some really, really good teams that did some damage in the playoffs. They just haven't been able to have the talent level to sustain that success going forward. Then Lakewood getting their first victory, so welcome to the conference, Lakewood, and getting their first victory there. So without further ado, we did have the Buckeye in Elyria Catholic was one of the SOT podcast's games of the week. Take it away.
Well, first, Ed,
Oh,
glorious.
My apologies. Quite honestly, I forgot who did the game, so that was my bad. I was taking a stab. It was Robert.
You had a
Josh.
25% chance that it was one of us.
I know. 33.
33.3%. Yeah, you're right. That's right.
I made it worse to myself.
I was trying to help you out, but yeah.
You were.
And I thought you just did the Buckeye recap.
No, Rob, I'm about to do the Buckeye recap right now. That's right, folks.
Get in there.
Yours.
So, let me do this properly.
Thank you.
Covering not only doing double duty, doing all the Suburban League, but having covered the Buckeye and Elyria Catholic game. My cohort, my compadre, my colleague, Sean Duffy, take it away, please.
Oh, thank you.
I thought you had some more colorful names.
And I was going to say, great job on the recap of the GLC, as always. I had the luck to cover the Elyria Catholic game, and don't mind me, I'm just vamping because my notes went dead on me. So thank you for that. But yes, I did travel the 10 and a half minutes from my home to Knights of Columbus Stadium at Elyria Catholic to watch the Buckeye Bucks take on the Elyria Catholic Panthers. And obviously this had everything we wanted in an early September matchup. These two teams battled last year. Both these teams are really at the top of the conference when you include Bay and Holy Name in there as well. And you know what? We've been following Buckeye on and off for the last, 5 years we've been doing football coverage, 4 or 5 years. So we definitely knew what Buckeye had, and Elyria Catholic was something that we were going to, investigate, especially with Rob mentioned that when he covered the Elyria Catholic game, what a great leader Steve Navalinsky is, the quarterback from Elyria Catholic. And he was just as good this game. To start off, the Buckeye Bucks were the first ones to get on the scoreboard. And I know what you're thinking. Long, sustained drive, jet sweep, 4 yards, cloud of dust. Nope. No, sir. 62-yard touchdown pass for Buckeye quarterback Jaden May to Cayman Marshall. After it made extra point, the game all of a sudden was 7-0 with about 10 minutes left in the first quarter. Elyria would not go away quickly, and they ended up scoring pretty quickly as they scored on their next possession thanks to an 18-yard touchdown pass from Panther quarterback Steve Navalinsky to Jack Kenalele. I don't know how to pronounce that name. There's a lot of vowels in there and not too many consonants. But Jack Kenalele had a touchdown pass, and all of a sudden the score was tied up 7-7. Here's where the Panther defense, and I texted Ed late in the game, and I said, legitimate consideration for the Panther defense. Your player of the week was a great suggestion, but I'm going to give you a little bit of information here as to how the Panther defense was able to really step it up in this game. During the following possession after Elyria Catholic scored, Panther defensive back Jack Budinger intercepted a Jaden May pass and took it 44 yards up the sideline for a pick six. It was a huge turning point because at that point Buckeye was doing what they normally do, like we talked about, 4 yards in a cloud of dust, and they were making headway methodically down the field. Then all of a sudden they do a pass. It was a short pass that was picked off across the middle, and Budinger took it up the sideline for a touchdown. And all of a sudden, we're off to the races with Elyria Catholic. From that point on, Elyria Catholic was seized control of this game and never let it go. They were able to score almost not at will, but they were able to make bigger, better plays than the Bucks defense was able to stop. Panthers started the second quarter deep into the Bucks territory, but I will say this: the Buckeyes defense did kind of bow up here and there and didn't allow this to get too out of hand, and always remained them within striking distance. As they had a fourth, as they took over on downs early on in the second quarter, And the second quarter was really much a lot of the defenses, a lot of great plays by the defense, including 3 or 4 sacks by the Panther defense on Buckeyes quarterback Jaden May. And it wasn't until the waning moments of the half when Steve Navalinsky found Jared France and connected on a 13-yard touchdown. It's important to note here that on both the interception and this touchdown, that the Panthers opted to go for 2. And I don't know if it was essentially why they did it, but they didn't. They kicked the point after the first touchdown, but they just continually played that going for 2. And I think they realized that this maybe had a potential to turn into a points chasing game. Unfortunately, they were unable to convert these 2-point conversions, and it made the score at halftime 19-7 in favor of the Panthers. Now, the third quarter, much like the second quarter, and to be honest with you, the waning moments of the first quarter, was dominated by the Panthers as they were able to add 2 more touchdowns to the scoreboard. One, a 7-yard touchdown run by running back Dominic Stevenson. The other would be a 20-yard pass from Navalinsky to running back Levi Ellis. And I posted this video on Twitter and attached it to my article because it's a really scintillating way. It was just it was a pass out to the flats. I thought it was going to go for maybe 5-6 yards, and he cuts it back to the middle of the field and just runs right in the end zone and right at yours truly, who's holding his camera. Yeah. I'd also like to point out the play before, there was an overthrown pass, and your boy in the back of the end zone caught it. And everyone was really impressed because I was doing it with a phone and one hand. They don't talk about that.
Well, do you know what else is impressive is we're showing the video as you talk about it right now.
Oh, actually, I can't see that. So, yeah, you see them camera skills? That's what I do. That's the extra level I get there. Now,
there you go.
At the end of the third quarter, Elyria Catholic held a pretty commanding 33-7 lead. And at that point, the game was pretty much salted away by Elyria Catholic. I do want to mention one thing. And I wanted to bring this up because last week's guest, Griffin Mitchell, caught the only other touchdown pass for the Bucs. A 17-yard touchdown pass from Jaden May to Bucs tight end. And I even mentioned in my article, recent Sports on Tap guest, Griffin Mitchell. Unfortunately, this was with about 15 to 20 seconds left in the fourth quarter. The game was pretty much over. But nonetheless, a very impressive effort by young Griffin Mitchell. I'm sure he's got great things going on, and it's an unfortunate, they didn't get the win. But the final score from Elyria Catholic was Elyria Catholic 33, Buckeye Bucks 14. Elyria Catholic does move to 2-1. They will travel to take on newly winning Lakewood this week in week 5. Buckeye falls to 1-1 in the year. They'll look to rebound as they play host to Parma Valley Forge. And I believe they are 1-0 as they are 1-0 coming off their win last week, correct?
They are 2-0.
2-0. Sorry,
2-0.
That score didn't go final when I wrote the article, so will be 2-0. So yeah, pretty good. I mean, excellent performance by Elyria Catholic. Buckeye just didn't seem to get out into a groove. They had that long touchdown pass in the beginning, and they just kind of, with penalties and not really executing, they just didn't really seem sharp. And Elyria Catholic exploited that. And maybe it's a little, we talked about this, last week, and maybe it's rearing its head. I mean, this is Buckeye's second game of the year, whereas this was Elyria Catholic's third or fourth game. So, I mean, you're talking about a team that's pretty much maybe identified some mistakes and knows that and corrected them so that they can continue to execute at a higher level. But again, this was not the typical Buckeye performance. They kind of were scrambling a little bit at the end, throughout the game, trying to chase points a little bit. They didn't seem comfortable in their game plan once they got behind, and I don't think that particular offense is set up to be from behind. They need to kind of either play close or they need to bust big runs. That's pretty much what it was. But I want to say a special thank you to Elyria Catholic. They were very, very accommodating. They allowed me to roam around. It was senior night, so there was actually a lot of people there, a lot of family stuff there, which was really cool. And I'll give you a little sneak peek into my life. My son's flag football team played just over there at St. Jude's, and they got smoked 34-0. So we're going to work on that on Saturday morning. But,
head coach Sean Duffy, everybody.
That was not me. That was head fan in the stands, Sean Duffy. I was not a coach. I was not responsible. But now that I'm done with that, that puts a lid on the GLC for the week 4. I'm going to move on to the Suburban League.
Nicely done, Sean.
Thank you. I tried my best.
Yeah, great job on the video too, buddy.
I know, right? I'm learning. I'm doing
Hey,
better.
championship effort, Sean, and I should know.
I hate everything about you.
You know, Sean's getting up to that level. He's getting there.
Maybe.
I don't know.
See, I don't do this before you guys do your recaps. Now you're all in my head. Now,
Hey, you're the ones with. Hey, I caught the ball with one phone and one hand in my phone and the other hand catching the ball. Hey, and just want you to know that my son's team lost 30-40-0, but it wasn't because of me. I was #1 fan in the stands. So
yeah,
you want that?
all of that's accurate. All of that's accurate.
So is this about as accurate
listen. I agree to disagree.
Hey, Sean, can you bring your son on and you can ask him how they're going to do next week? Are they going to guarantee a victory?
Oh.
Yeah, he already has. I don't care. You could ask him. He's in bed right now because he's got to go to school in the morning. But yeah. All right. So beyond enough of this nonsense.
Let's go to Sean Duffy and the Suburban League.
Starting off in the National Division, Stowe traveled in to take on North Royalton, and unfortunately for North Royalton, Stowe was able to eke out a 7-point victory on the road, 21-14. North Royalton did try to mount a comeback in the second half, but unfortunately they just ran out of time. They were only able to get it within 7. North Royalton falls to 0-4 in the year. They will travel to face Nordonia in Week 5. Stowe is now 3-0. They host in a big game Brecksville in Week 5. In the other National Division game was a big one, was a shootout, was a points bonanza, a yards bonanza, potential player of the week caliber type performances. Is Hudson facing Wadsworth, and Hudson rushed its way to a huge victory on the road at Wadsworth, 62-42 in favor of the Explorers. Hudson running back Aiden Lyle had 104 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Not to be outdone, the other running back, Drew Leitner, 19 carries, 196 yards, 3 touchdowns. The Hudson rushing attack amassed 354 yards on the ground on 38 carries and accounted for 8 touchdowns in this game. It was not an aerial attack by any means. Quarterback Jacob Peltani also had a rush touchdown, and he went 21 of 30 for 242 yards and the 1 rush touchdown. Not to be outdone, Wadsworth's quarterback, Week 1 Player of the Week, Notre Dame commit Mitchell Evans had 9 rushes for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also went 22 of 38 for 381 yards and 3 touchdowns. Guys, Hudson's total offensive yards, 596.
Whoa.
Wadsworth total offensive yards, 496. Guys, there was 1,000 yards in this game. Well over 1,000 yards in this game gained on. So I want to say, first off, shout out to the offensive line for Hudson, because if you can do 354 yards in one game, you are moving people. You are hog-mollying up there. Congratulations. I would also like to say to those 2 running backs, fantastic effort. And it just, Hudson is a team right now. Ed mentioned it about Olmsted Falls. I don't think anybody wants to play Hudson right now. They have one of the most explosive offenses in these 4 weeks that I've seen, I think, in the state. I put them up against anybody in the state. It's really impressive to see stat-wise week to week. As I mentioned, Hudson does improve to 4-0. They travel to take on Highland. Wadsworth falls to 1-2. They will host Barberton in Week 5. My lone Suburban League American Division game happened on Thursday, where Copley routed Talmadge 47-14. Copley remains undefeated on the year behind an impressive rushing performance. This was an initially very close game up until the 4th quarter, when Copley just rattled off 27 unanswered points. Most of that came by way of running back Preston Taylor, who had 23 carries, 203 yards, 4 touchdowns on the night. Copley wide receiver Daryl Pringle III also had 2 rushing touchdowns. He's a wideout, and they both happened on a jet sweep. Talmadge did have an interception returned for a touchdown and a pass touchdown by Ty Hurst by Ty Hurst, but it just wasn't enough points. And again, they hung with him for as long as they could, but Copley opened up in the fourth quarter, 27 unanswered. Talmadge falls to 0-3, and they will take on Twinsburg in week 5. Copley's 3-0. They are scheduled to host Roosevelt on Saturday. Just keep in mind that Roosevelt's games have been postponed due to COVID, so there's some interesting kind of moving parts that have to work out there. Speaking of Kent Roosevelt, as I mentioned last week, the Kent Roosevelt Aurora game was postponed due to COVID. The very next day, the night that we were on the air, Aurora was able to schedule a game against Columbus Bishop Sycamore. And again, after scrambling to find an opponent, after late night, not having a lot of time to prepare, Aurora was able to come away with a 31-8 victory. And Aurora running back Aiden Henderson had 18 carries for 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. Quarterback Alex Moore went 5 of 12 for 77 yards, no touchdowns. Running back Evan McKay also had a rushing touchdown. I mean, for a short week for Aurora, really not a lot of time to prep. Very impressive. Aurora's 3-1. They travel to take on Cuyahoga Falls in week 5. So Aurora was able to come out of it in a last-minute non-divisional, non-conference matchup, on the fly. As Rob mentioned, Cuyahoga Falls did go in to take on Westlake. They lost 26-28. Again, Cuyahoga Falls just didn't have enough firepower to stay up there and get that win. They are now 0-3. They will host Aurora, as I mentioned, in week 5. Revere versus Twinsburg. It remains undefeated. Can't even read my writing. As it travels into Twinsburg, comes out with a hard-fought victory. Revere quarterback Zach Coffey went 10 of 14 for 150 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Revere running back Shane Slattery and Cameron Penizik each had rushing touchdowns to help the Revere Minutemen coast to a 28-14 victory over Twinsburg. The highlights from Twinsburg came mainly on special teams. Ed, I know you'll love this. Senior Manny Curtis blocked 2 punts in this game. Both of those were returned for touchdowns, not by him. One was by Aiden Corrigan, the other by Antoine Brown. But that was really the only positive offensive movement in here for Twinsburg. They were able to have they were only able to score the 2 touchdowns on special teams play. Revere is 2-1. They travel to face Westlake out of conference next week, and Twinsburg will host Talmadge. Our couple more games here. Brecksville traveled in to take on Barberton. It was senior night in Barberton. Brecksville's running back Garrett Kubitz ended up breaking a school rushing record in this game. He had 183 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. He broke the all-time school career record in yards, which was held previous by the guy he took over for as a sophomore. I did not get his name, unfortunately, because I'm terrible. His
name is Alec Buckley.
Buckley, that's right. I'm sorry. And his 5 touchdowns on the night matches his own single game rushing touchdown record from last year. So Garrett Kubitz, again, a record-breaking night for him. Barberton just could not stop this rushing attack. The quarterback Shandon Lee went 8 for 19 for 184 yards, 2 touchdowns. Running backs Cam Macon and Kobe Campbell each had a rushing touchdown, each for big yardage, big runs, over 40 yards apiece. But Brecksville gets the win, 45. The Bees get the win, 45-31. Barberton falls to 0-4. They travel to Wadsworth in week 5. Brecksville is 3-1. They will travel to Stowe in week 5. My final game was a good one. It was a great game, and it bears repeating that this was probably seen as an upset going into this game, as the Highland Hornets traveled in to take on an Ordonia team that was hot, coming off a big win over Wadsworth. But the Hornets were able to upset Ordonia on the road in overtime. Highland running back Luke Stiles, 170 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. Highland quarterback Aaron Phillips had 124 yards rushing himself. He also had 98 yards and 1 touchdown to get the win, 44-38 in overtime. Nordonia's quarterback and last week's player of the week, Billy Levac, no shame in this game, 348 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. Unfortunately, just wasn't enough to get the win. Nordonia running back Sal Perrine, 112 yards rushing and 1 touchdown reception, one from Billy Levac. But yeah, this is a huge win for Highland. Coming with a team like Nordonia coming off a really big emotional win over Wadsworth. But unfortunately, Nordonia falls to 2-2. They will host North Royalton in week 5. Highland 2-1. It doesn't get any easier for them as they have to play Hudson. They have to host Hudson in week 5. That's going to be a good game and a very tough test for the Highland Hornets. My G&G Fitness Coach of the Week had to go to Mike Gibbons out of Highland, an overtime win against a team like Nordonia that's just is a very impressive win. But Player of the Week, this was tough. I felt like last week it was all quarterbacks making a case for Player of the Week, but this week it was the running game, the running backs, and the offensive lines that just didn't like not getting the pub. I decided to give it to Garrett Kubitz. I mean, look, he broke a school record in a game, 5 touchdowns. That's a great accomplishment. So Garrett Kubitz of the Brecksville Broadview Heights Bees is my RRT Productions Player of the Week. The Suburban League schedule for week 5 is as follows. Brecksville travels to Stowe. North Royalton travels to Nordonia. Aurora will travel to Cuyahoga Falls. Roosevelt will travel to Copley, and that game is on Saturday, September 26th. My non-divisional matchup for the Suburban League have Barberton traveling to take on Wadsworth, Hudson versus Highland, Twinsburg versus Talmadge, and Revere travels to Westlake. Guys, that's all she wrote for the Suburban League. Hopefully I didn't murder too many names or, go too fast.
Well, Sean, you said it when you said it was like the week of the running back, because I believe all 4 of our RT Productions Player of the Week nominees are running backs.
Let me tell you something.
Who says the running backs are a dead position?
Listen, I went back and forth all day today before naming my Player of the Week, and I want to give a special shout out to the Hudson offensive line. Listen, it came down to me deciding to give it to one specific player, but nothing takes away from that performance. 354 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns on the ground. That's the Explorer offensive line put in work last week. They got chocolate milk all around. There is not a guy on that offensive line that did their running back, their quarterback, the receivers should be taking these guys out for steak. That's how good these guys played last week. Speaking as a former offensive lineman, we always like to get our pub. So
there you go. Are you gonna send them chocolate milk their way, or how do they receive that?
I'm not allowed to have chocolate milk in the house. My wife won't let me.
Really? Well, that's unfortunate.
Because I drink it all.
Oh, I got nothing. I think we should just wrap it up there. It's good. All right, everyone. See you next week.
Yeah.
I think we should be. I would be remiss. I know we're coming up against it here, but we'll be remiss if we didn't mention that there are. We're 2 weeks away from the playoffs, and the Ohio High School Athletic Association has divided the teams back up into regions, which is fantastic for when you want to look at a team at joeidle.com, because it's way easier to look at a specific region than it is trying to go into Division I and see 60-some teams.
Right.
But it's so we're getting back into region mode. There have been some changes, not really a whole lot that affects our specific conferences per se, but there's but just to kind of go through what's going to look like here is modified regions were drawn based on teams that did opt in. Coaches will vote to seed the teams in the regions during the week of September 28th, which is said differently, which will be after competition this week. The first round will begin October 9th and 10th. And then teams may schedule more regular season games with a maximum of 10 after they are eliminated. So what you may see also is specific to Division I, Region I, which is all Josh's conference in the Greater Cleveland Conference. And this is information that was written up by Matt Gould from Cleveland.com. He does a really good job of looking at high school football here. I wish there was more of him available to go around because he provides really good information. But specific to Division One, Region One, there's 16 teams in that region, and short of anyone else falling out, those teams are probably going to have a bye in Week 7, as they navigate through the rest of their season. Whereas a lot of divisions, you're going to have some teams play in that first week. So what you may see is, instead of taking the bye week, some teams may try to schedule a game in Week 7 to try to keep themselves sharp before they start their playoffs, technically in the second round of the playoffs, which would be Week 8. And then, I think Division 1 is probably the one that's most affected by that because they have the least amount of schools. From what the article said, all but 4 teams, as it's currently constituted, are going to get byes in that first week of the playoffs. So we're going to also see some teams in our respective divisions, and probably 2, 3, 4, and 5 also get some byes depending on how it shakes out. So stay tuned. Keep it here every Monday night as we go through our conferences, and we'll do our best to bring as much information to the group, to our listeners and our viewers as possible when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah, great job, Ed. And one thing you can do is go to our website, Sports on Tap Podcast .com, and also send us an email. If you have information and you have stats, you have stories, Sports on Tap Podcast @gmail.com. We're on Twitter @SOT Podcast to follow our game coverage. But you always do a great job breaking it down, and especially with the playoffs coming up. I mean, there's some pretty big things going on, like you said, and as it gets closer, I'm sure everyone will want kind of more details on how it all breaks down. So we'll just have to wait and see as we get closer here. So, guys, any last thoughts here on Week 4? We're looking at Week 5 coming up, and it's been 5 or 4 quick weeks, really. It seems like it's gone really quick since they started, and I know it's a shortened season, so it's a little bit weird. And all this is kind of new to us too, with everything going on, but we're still getting good coverage out there, and a lot of people appreciate the coverage, and just good to have football out there and be able to watch it and cover it.
Yeah, make sure following our Twitter page @SOT Podcast tonight. Right as the show ends tonight, we're going to put up our Player of the Week poll. We do our Coach of the Week on Saturdays. Our G&G Fitness Coach of the Week poll, that goes up on Saturdays. That'll be up there as well. Plus, later on, probably with the next day or so, we'll be putting on there which games are going to be at this week. We're still discussing what our schedules are like and what location, what games would be best for us. So just make sure you're following us on Twitter @SOT Podcast, and we keep that up to date with all the up-to-date information.
Hey, Josh, who ended up winning the G&G Fitness Coaches poll this week?
Oh, I'm glad that you asked, Sean. Stand by. I can get the results.
Synergy,
yes.
Synergy.
Give me 1 second. I was in the middle of doing the.
And I think it was.
No, I already did the Buckeye recap. You don't need to do the Buckeye recap.
I think
Sean,
it was.
did you just watch the movie In Good Company recently? That's a big thing in that. That's a big thing that Topher Grace uses in that movie.
No. I sit on conference calls all day, and that's a word that's been thrown around a lot. Is we have to synergize with other departments during this time.
But during that meeting, he is watching that movie.
No, and during that meeting, I'm taking notes and being a really good employee.
That's good. Well, back to the G&G Fitness.
Yes, please. Hurry up. Hurry back to the G&G Fitness.
For Week 4. It was actually really, really tight, or not so tight for a long time. Coach Tommy from Lakewood was running away with it, and then all of a sudden, Highland Hornets, the Hornets hive, kind of all started buzzing around, and they, as I posted, they rallied the troops and put Coach Gibbons over the top. So we had 161 total votes. Coach Gibbons came away with 53% of the votes, followed by Coach Tomey from Lakewood with 30%. Rob, how do you say Coach's last name?
Kostelnik.
Oh, Kostelnik. Sorry.
And, no.
Sereno.
Yes, that was your coach, Kostelnik.
Smith.
Yes.
Kostelnik. So we appreciate everyone who took the time to vote and retweet and follow along with the poll. We're expecting huge numbers tonight once our players go up there. And then, again, that'll be up there momentarily after the show ends.
So go to @SOT Podcast.
Vote.
On Twitter.
Props to 2 former Mount Union Purple Raiders for being nominated, and one of which having gotten the win this week in Mike Gibbons. The other one is Matt Kostelnik.
There you go.
Both Mount Union Raiders there, Purple Raiders.
But I bet none of them ever looked like a linebacker kicking the ball.
They haven't, but they were both actual linebackers and safeties. They were infinitely better than I was. Not even close.
There you go.
Ed, you could have been a linebacker, man. We know it.
I'm not sure I would have wanted to go against against Mike Gibbons in practice.
I'm not sure. I barely want to interview the guy. He's pretty intimidating.
I'm good. I like being on his good side, but just by kicking a football between the uprights, I don't really need to get in his way.
There you go. Understandable there. Mount Union, man, that's big boys play there. You know what I mean? Well done, guys.
I don't know what any of that means on an awkward note.
I mean, he's not wrong,
dude. He's not wrong, but it just. I mean, you really want to be on record saying that?
We win lots of titles.
Yeah, that's where the big boys play, man.
That's a lot.
That's where they win titles, man.
All right.
Yep. And
Winning.
it's great to be in company with a fellow champ.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
It sure is.
Hey, I've been champ before too. I mean, come on.
So
I'm actually 2
we
times.
actually all of us have on this dais. We're collectively the champions of of this podcast,
Of something.
of this league.
Well, I mean, it should be. It's named after our podcast. We should win the damn thing.
Ed. They haven't picked up on that yet.
That's okay.
The rest of them haven't picked up on that yet.
Well, we're not good at pronouncing players' names, but we sure are good at drafting fantasy football teams. So
There you go.
Yes, when the only competition is each other. Yes, we are very good at that. I would defer you to my DraftKings account, and I would say that against the rest of the world, not very good.
You'll have that.
You got to play who's on your schedule, all right? That's all.
That's true. That's all. That's the way it works. All right, Rob, take us out.
All right, guys. Great job tonight. And everybody have a great week. And for Sean Duffy, Josh Jeffy, Ed Dick, I'm Rob Troutman saying so long for Sports on Tap. I want to thank everybody who joined us and on Facebook Live and joined everything we had to do tonight with all of our recaps. Look at Josh. He's getting crazier there. You can't even see him anymore. I think he's had a few adult beverages, and he's taking us home.
Just living the life as champ, my friend.
There you are.
Enjoy it.
All right, guys. Great job as always, and we'll see everybody as we cover Week 5. But go to @SOT Podcast on Twitter for our RT Productions Player of the Week, and also our website, sportsontappodcast.com, where we'll let you know where we'll be here this Friday night. See you later, everybody.
If you look closer, you can see Sean's disdain in the reflection of the belt. The champ is out.
You.
Good night, everybody.
I'm stealing that belt.
Oh, dear. All right. See you guys.
Breaking into your house and stealing that belt.
Good night, everybody.